Okay. So nakikita ba yung slides? At narinig niyo ba ako?
Yes, sir.
Yes po.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Alright. So naka-record na. Alright. So this would be a lesson regarding basic ethical case analysis. So ano nga ba ang ibig sabihin ng ethical case analysis or basic ethical case analysis? This is a common exercise for identifying and reasoning about ethical challenges in complex situations. So, whenever you encounter an experience, whether that is your personal experience or an experience of another person, you'll be able to identify which ethical theories would be applicable for it. Since you are not philo major, you don't concern about other concepts that are more complicated, no, when it comes to ethics. No? Yung sa atin lang, yung diniscuss ko lang is the basic ones. We have utilitarianism, no, natural law, deontology, and virtue ethics. Kasi most often than not, no, when it comes to your professional life later on, you will have your own professional ethics. No, sa FinMan, no? FinMan, Financial Management, ang alam ko meron kayong another set of ethical rules to follow, no? Tinatawag na Professional Code of Ethics. Magkaiba yan sa bawat profession. So for example, sa doctors, may tinatawag na bioethics when it comes to deciding for the life of a patient. So may included professional code of ethics when it comes to the doctors, no, yung mga medical doctors. And another thing would be for journalism, for example, no, as simple as a journalism course would have a professional code of ethics. Um, yung tinatawag na being true to the information. Kasi sa kanila yung information, and they have the authority, no, when it comes to information dissemination. Yung pag-report pa lang ng isang news would actually influence, no, the knowledge of the audience. Kung fake news ang palaging pinapalabas sa journalism ng isang tao, then talking about ethics, he or she would be considered as unethical. So may mga different complex situations tayo sa buhay natin na that cannot be discussed in a four cornered classroom. No? Yung real life situations would depend upon you when you encounter the outside world. So this is a systematic approach in figuring out the right moral decision in a particular situation. So by analyzing the situation logically in accordance with your ethical code, ano man yung magiging ethical code nyo later on, yung business ad, particularly FinMan, financial management, you have your own ethical codes. So you can figure out which options are both effective and moral. So its principles are also encourage you to form an accurate picture of the situation and think through the effect of your decisions before you act. So yung, for example, when it comes to utilitarianism, babalikan natin yung lesson natin sa utilitarianism. In a nutshell, no, it simply states that you should always choose to act um, in act I with the thinking that the result of your action would be beneficial to the majority of the people. Or in other words, as long as the resultant happiness would be for the most for the most number of people living in your own community. Um, Kasi kayo bilang estudyante pa lang, your immediate environment will be your own community. Not only your family, not only your relatives, but your community to where you are living right now. Kung ano mang poblasyon yan, ano barangay. And and also when you come to the school, you are also bounded by the ethical code of our university. Um, as always, yung palaging binabanggit natin sa lessons natin, we are very much different from animals, no? Who act based on their instincts. So kapag ikaw, for example, nakakita ng isang event na warrants your attention, um, kadalasan naman kasi we don't act on our impulses, di ba? Meron ba dito yung parang pag may naisip na gagawin, gagawin niyo kaagad without even thinking about it or even thinking about the consequence? Meron ba dito? I hope konti lang. No? Kung meron man, I hope konti lang. Pero kasi ang pinagkaiba natin, uh, as much as possible, no, whenever you act on something, you have to think about it. Hindi naman kailangan matagalan, pero at least you have process it all along. So, for example, no, kapag hindi ka naka-review, no, kunyari hindi ka naka-review, tapos malapit na exams, ang gagawin mo na lang, mag-cheat ka na lang, no? Rampant ngayon yan kasi because of this virtual setting that we have, online class setting, merong temptation. Merong temptation na mag-cheat kasi hindi nakatingin sa'yo yung teacher or kaya mga kaklase mo walang tumitingin sa'yo. Uh, so the temptation is there, but it is up to you as a person whether you would give in to the temptation or not, whether you would become ethical or unethical. So there are situations that are called that warrant our attention and our decision because most probably these situations would have an effect on our lives or that of the other people. So these are called ethical or moral dilemmas. These situations in which conflicts between two choices are present. Most often than not, ito kasi yung nagwawarat ng ating ethical case analysis. Yung tinatawag na moral dilemma or ethical dilemma. So for example, I think I also mentioned this in our first lesson, the introductory lectures to ethics. A mother who has the sole responsibility of feeding her children but is unemployed has the tendency to commit theft. No? Kapag siya ay walang trabaho, walang kinikita, at meron siyang anak, most often than not, di ko naman sinasabing lahat, no? Pero most often than not, the temptation is there to commit a crime. Most especially uh, theft, no? Pagnanakaw. Lalo kapag ikaw ay nasa harap ng isang, for example, pagkain, no? Pag ikaw put yourself on the situation of this mother who has the responsibility of feeding her children. Children, hindi lang isa. No? But is unemployed. Wala kang kinikita tapos merong bumalagta sa harap mo na pagkain. No? More often than not, may temptation na kumuha ng pagkain para mapakain mo yung anak mo. Let's start with that. No? Yung temptation. What matters would be your action on it. Pwede mong maisip kasi na nanakawin ko ba to o hindi. No? There's nothing wrong with that kasi tao lang naman tayo eh. No? We are tempted by these evil thoughts of committing a sin or a crime. What matters would be your action afterwards. Would you give in to the temptation? So in other words, the moral agent is faced with the difficulty of making a moral decision between stealing or letting her children go hungry, which could even lead to death. May namamatay sa kagutuman. No? Sa language ng ibang bansa, some parts of America. They call this starving to death. Kaya nga wait, yung sa English pala, no, Britain I think, no. They don't use the word starve. Kasi pag sinabi mong starving, para kang you are deprived of um, you are deprived of you are deprived of food, no? Kumbaga, walang-wala, kaya you are starving to death, no? Pinagkaiba na naman sa hungry, ang hungry naman momentarily lang. For example, wala pang oras ng pagkain, ikaw ay estudyante, nasa klase ka, you are hungry. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin you are starving. Because when you say you are starving, you are really deprived of food security. No? You are really deprived. You cannot really afford to buy food. Kaya yung term na starving is a different story. So, um, worse hunger pala. No? Worse hunger would mean starving. And starving could lead to death. So yung dilemma nitong mother na ito is whether he would choose to let her children die because of starvation, or that she would commit a crime of theft, of stealing. Which is which? So meron kasing mga bagay na that calls for, especially when it comes to the life, when it comes to survival, to the life of your loved ones, for example. Most often than not, we would choose survival, no, over morality. And yun lang yung mahirap dito sa ethics. Kasi for example, naalala ko yung isang balita. Isang mama na nagugutom at yung pamilya na nagugutom, nagnakaw ng isang dilata. Isang dilata lang sa isang grocery store, at yung may-ari ng grocery store ay nagsampa ng kaso sa kanya. So, nakulong siya ng ilang araw ata. So, mas naging worse kasi nga mas naging nagutom, mas nagutom yung pamilya niya. Kasi nga pinakulong siya. So, pag ikaw yung may-ari nung owner, yung store na yun, what would you do? What could have been your action? Madali kasing sabihin na na sir, baka gagawin ko ito, ganyan. But what matters really is the real life situation. Kumbaga pagdating sa panahon na yon, sino ba dito yung may-ari ng, meron ba ditong yung parents nila may-ari ng isang store, or at least kayo siguro merong investment na, meron ba dito? You may open your mic. Wala naman. So, ganun yung mga ethical dilemmas, no? So, in other words, hindi lang kasi sa nang kukumit ng crime yung problema. Sometimes, when you are a suspect of a crime, it is also upon you whether to choose punishment for the um, theft, that had took place, and whether to punish the perpetrator, yung committer ng crime. So in a sense, hindi lang siya sa moral agent nakatuon, kundi sa taong concerned din. No? For example, ikaw yung may-ari ng store na ninakawan, or let's add this mother who has the sole responsibility of feeding her children, pero walang trabaho, tapos pumunta siya sa store mo, tapos nagtangkang magnakaw, tapos nahuli mo, ano kayang gagawin mo bilang isang store owner? Kasi papasok dyan yung tinatawag nating empathy, no? Or sympathy. The ability to connect with the other person of what he or she is experiencing through. So ethical dilemmas are complicated challenges. Hindi ko pala na-edit ito. That cannot be easily solved. Therefore, the ability to find the optimal solution in such situations is critical to everyone. Sa Pilipinas, marami yan yung moral dilemma. Um, yun ang problema kasi sa Pilipino, nawawala yung moral agency. Parang yung ano, naalala ko tuloy. Meron ba sa inyo yung may pamangkin or friend or kapatid siguro na nagdo-doktor na nasa residency ngayon? Meron ba sa inyo? Wala. Or kakilala? Wala. Anyway, um, yung iba kasing training, pag sinabi kasing resident ka ng isang kang doctor na resident, ibig sabihin nun, you are under training. For example, pipili ka ng isang specialization mo, let's say surgeon, surgery, gusto mo maging surgeon, so under ka ng training program ng isang surgery. And being a resident, especially when you are first year resident, para kang back to zero. No? Kahit na doktor ka, kakawawain ka ng mga seniors mo. Para siyang PMA no? Style. PMA kasi may initiation. No? Yung pang internal arrangement, parang papahirapan ka para makita kung kaya mo bang ma-survive yung pinupush mong specialization. So, um, para rin siyang pagsali ng isang frat no, or sorority, no, may initiation. Yun nga lang, pinagkaiba, professional initiation. So, bakit ko nabanggit yun? Kasi may mga initiation, for example, sa residency. I know this because I have a friend who is a resident, currently resident, na first year resident siya. Hindi ko na babanggitin kung anong hospital. Pero kasi yung training program nila, napaka-unethical. Sobra, kasi hindi mo akalain talaga no na parang ganun pala yung mga doctors. For example, as simple as stealing your own food. Pag meron kang pagkain doon, ikaw ay isang first year resident. Pagkain ka, iniwan mo sa inyong quarters, may bigla na lang kukuha na isang doctor doon na wala man lang paalam. Ang masaklap pa doon, hindi ka pa kumain, galing ka ng 24 hours duty, tapos nanakawin na lang bigla yung pagkain mo. Ang masaklap pa doon, binigay pa yung pagkain mo, hindi lang sa'yo. No? Kumbaga, binigay ng loved one mo yung pagkain sa'yo, tapos ninakaw pa ng iba. So, galing ka pa ng duty. So, this certain type of cases, no, ethical moral dilemma na parang it will really surprise you how far can an ethical or immoral agent can go further. Pag ikaw kasi ay nasanay na, sabi nga ni Aristotle, whatever you do, it becomes a habit. No? Whatever you do every day can become your habit. And eventually, this habit can become your own moral development. Can become your own moral character. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Pag ikaw nasanay magnakaw everyday, magiging normal na sa'yo yun. Kung first time, parang may konsensya ka pa, the second time around, third time around, and siguro 10th time around, wala ka na ma-feel. And that's bothering. Kasi yung friend ko na yon twice nang ninakawan ng pagkain. Doctor siyang nagnanakaw. Bakit? Paano sure na doctor ang nagnakaw nun? Kasi walang ibang pumapasok sa quarters kundi doctors lang. So, paano nawala yung pagkain niya? And among other things, no, simple lang yung napakababaw lang yung binigay yung example, pero meron pa siyang naikwento na sobrang unethical na practice. Sobrang unethical talaga. Immoral na. Hindi mo akalain ginagawa ng mga doctors. But anyway, so ganun, no, yung ethical dilemmas. No? Pag ikaw may-ari ng pagkain na yun, for example, how would you feel or what actions would you be able to take after that incident? Sabi ko nga sa kanya, kainin na lang niya kaagad, eh. 'Pag may pagkain ka, kainin mo na lang kaagad kaysa sa bigyan mo ng temptation yung ibang tao na magnakaw, 'di ba? Kasi kung ang tao ay palaging nagnanakaw, hindi yan madaling turuan, eh. Hindi yan madaling turuan kung ano yung tama. He has or she has to realize it on his or her own. Kailangan niyang ma-realize yun sa kanyang person 'no, sa kanyang, um, sariling, reflection 'no. Parang ang matigas na ulo ng tao, mapapalambot lang yun gamit ang sarili niyang ulo. Hindi mo mapapalambot yan gamit ang ulo ng iba. So further, there is a difficult choice to be made between two or more options, sometimes neither of which resolves the situation in a manner that is consistent with acceptable ethical guidelines. So for example, yung kanina, yung mother who is unemployed but has children, and these children of her are getting hungry, that could lead to um, starvation and eventually, unfortunately, to death. No? So, as is illustrated by the example above, since stealing is bad in itself, no, wala namang mabuting stealing. Stealing is an action that is bad in itself. No? And not feeding your own children is also bad in itself. So, may ethical dilemma doon. However, stealing is the lesser evil. No, because it does not harm except to the person's property to any other human being. Letting your children go starve or letting your children go hungry for a longer period of time can lead to starvation and therefore to death is a much evil action as opposed to stealing. Do you agree? Can you agree? Pero hindi naman sinasabing, okay, so mag-stay na lang ba ako? Hindi. Sinasabi lang dito, we are just describing na yun na yung pinaka-lesser evil na pwedeng gawin ng isang nagugutom na tao. That's why rampant ang stealing sa atin. Rampant ang stealing for needs. Rampant noon yung kasagsagan ng cellphone noon, yung pagnakaw ng cellphone, pag-snatch ng cellphone. Kasi yung cellphone na yun 'pag nabenta nila, malaking halaga, meron silang pangkain. Always yan 'no, yung food pa rin talaga, yung food security pa rin talaga yung isang problema ng, food insecurity rather 'no, yung food insecurity ng Filipinos ang isang malaking problema sa ating bansa 'no. Kasi nga some cannot experience, eating 3 times a day. Kapag ikaw pinagpalad pa 'no, kapag ikaw nasa isang pamilya na may kaya, hindi lang 3 times a day kayong kumakain, eh, 'no? May mga 5 times a day pa kasi may merienda sa umaga, may merienda sa hapon. Maliban na lang kung may merienda ka sa midnight, midnight snacks. So, 6. Imagine that, 6 na beses kang kumakain sa isang araw, and then other people 'no, other Filipinos will not be able to eat even 1 meal a day. Masuwerte na lang 'pag merong isang meal a day. So, ito yung problema na nababanggit dito 'no. So what now? Kung ang stealing is the least evil, would the moral agent do it? Should the moral agent do it? Kasi otherwise kapag hindi niya ginawa yun, kumuha ng pagkain, maaaring mamatay. Hindi naman basta-basta mamamatay ang isang tao sa starvation, pero papunta na dun 'no. Ano pa 'yan, mawawalan pa 'yan ng consciousness, mawawalan ng malay muna bago mamatay, ma-o-hospital muna siguro 'no. Pero saan bang bansa? Sa Africa, um, sa north ba or south, I don't know. Pero may lugar kasi do'n na sobrang starve ang mga bata. Kitang-kita mo yung buto nila 'no. Ah, at may mga namamatay pa dahil lang sa gutom. Imagine that. And yun yung isang example dito na parang naisip ko kasi yung pinakamalapit na situation ng ating bansa. No? Because food will always be an essential part of your basic needs. Hindi yan mawawala. Meron ba dito ang hindi kumakain kahit may pagkain? Hapagkainan nila. Most often than not, wala, no? Wala sa inyo. Kasi normal tayo, normal na tao. Normal na tao, kailangan kumain at least 3 times a day. Or sa iba, two times a day. That's normal. Uh, so ethical or moral dilemmas are complicated challenges that cannot be easily solved. Therefore, the ability to find the optimal solution in such situations is critical to everyone. So every person may encounter an ethical dilemma in almost every aspect of their life, including personal, social, and professional. So siguro naman ngayong ano na kayo, 19, 18, meron na kayong na-experience na ethical dilemma or moral dilemma. And I would like you to reflect on your past experiences. Kung hindi man kayo yung moral agent, at least yung ibang tao na kakilala niyo naka-encounter ng ganito. Isang naisip ko kasing recently lang, no, teenage pregnancy. Yung problema ng isang teenage pregnant na college student, for example, may moral dilemma doon. Ano yung moral dilemma doon? Unang-una, wala siyang trabaho. No? Estudyante pa lang siya. So, what if binuhay niya yung anak niya and then knowing na hindi niya kayang buhayin, may problema pa rin doon kasi nga um, wala kang kakayahang magpakain sa anak mo. Isa-suffer mo pa yung anak mo. You will let him or her suffer. The other choice would be abortion. So, parang napakagrabing ethical moral dilemma example yun. No? Pero yun kasi yun eh. Yun kasi yung dilemma ng isang teenage pregnant eh. Most often than not, may percentage. No? However little it is, no? There's the percentage of committing abortion. Kasi estudyante yan. Unang-una, estudyante. Kung ang mag-asawa nga, nahihirapan mag-decide kung mag-aanak eh. Paano pa kaya yung nabuntis? Kasi ang pagpapaanak ng isang bata, ang pagpapaalaga ng isang bata ay hindi biro. Hindi siya hindi siya parang kumukuha ka ng isang sasakyan na kailangan mo alagaan. Hindi ganoon. Buhay yan eh. We're talking about a life. So most often than not, a teenage pregnant is most especially when their parents, no, yung lalaki kasama, when her parents um, are not supportive, no, of the pregnancy. Most often than not, the teenage pregnant is facing a moral or ethical dilemma of whether to have an abortion or to bear this child and nurture him or her. But you let him suffer precisely because you're not yet at the right age or financially stable to support the child. So ano yung lesser evil doon? Lesser evil would be to go with the pregnancy. Evil pa rin siya kasi nga teenage pregnant ka. Not unless you are a daughter of a very rich family, then money would not be problem for you. Or the thing is, yung tinatawag na lesser evil would be, masama pa rin siya, no? You let the children live even without even knowing na hindi mo pa siya kayang buhayin kasi nga um, wala ka bang trabaho. And this applies to all teenage pregnant. Yeah. So every person, again, may encounter such ethical dilemma. Kung hindi man ikaw maka-encounter, at least kakilala mo. Right? So let's go now to the 7-step moral reasoning model. So this is Scott Ray's 7-step moral reasoning model. So in our everyday life, we make decisions, whether it is trivial or important matters little. Kung gaano man kalit yan, it's still a decision. No? Whether you choose to wake up in the morning, whether you choose to get up out of bed, that's still a decision. Whether we are conscious of it or not is also beside the question. However, no, decisions that pertain to the means which we live by, such as basic necessities for life, like eating and drinking, personal hygiene care, or in other words, those that pertain to the survival of the human person, um, are decisions made mostly by the subconscious mind. In other words, basic instincts for the survival of the species. Pero kanina natakal na natin, no, how eating could be also be a problem, no, kapag ikaw ay nagugutom. That could also influence your mind, could also influence what action you should take in order to satisfy that hunger. So kung ikaw nagugutom at may lumantad sa'yo sa harap mo, wala kang pera na may lumantad sa'yo, you have the, for example, parang um, you have the free way to steal such a food, would you do it? I think na nabigay ko na ng example before, no, sa introductory lecture. What if sa harap mo may bumalagta na isang maletang naglalaman ng 1,000,000 peso? Would you steal it or not? No? At nalaman mo walang nakakakita sa'yo, walang saksi, walang witness. Would you steal it? So doon papasok yung ethical dilemma na wala namang nanonood, sir, wala namang maghuhuli sa akin. Hindi naman ako mahuhuli kaya gagawin ko na lang. I think that's the problem of most unethical, immoral agents kasi nga walang sumisita, walang sisita, walang witness. At kung meron mang witness, baka takot silang magsalita, for example. So, when we are hungry, we naturally choose to eat, or when we get sleepy, we tend to choose to sleep. There's nothing wrong with that. However, no, decisions that pertain to actions that would result in either good or bad, right or wrong, need to be pondered upon, analyzed, and if possible, philosophically investigated. So such decisions are considered to be ethical if and only if they concern the well-being, life, or death of the human person or that of the other people. So it is in this instance that ethical decision making should have a certain structure for it to be critically analyzed well. So such structure is provided in the 7 steps to ethical decision making, which is developed by Scott Ray, originally by Scott Ray, but later on collaborate siya kay Kenman L. Wong. Okay? So merong moral reasoning pa rin when it comes to ethical decision making. Hindi mawawala yan. No? Moral reasoning is judgment and decisions driven by moral perspectives anchored to rational ethical values. When we use ethical frameworks, no, ethical theories as frameworks, it can be considered as moral reasoning. For example, no, yung ginagawa ni Robin Hood, no, although fictional siya, napaka-utilitarian, no, because he steals for the benefit of the most number of people. No? So yung kanyang moral reasoning, although let's say he's not aware, kasi fictional nga, no? Fictional nga siya, kahit hindi siya aware sa tinatawag na utilitarianism, what he does is actually within the bounds of a utilitarian. As long as what you do or the result of what you do would be beneficial to the most number of people. Okay? So, before delving into the seven-step model, it is imperative to know the foundation behind it. There are two key points which ground the model name, namely rationality or reason and impartiality or fairness. Discuss lang natin itong dalawang to. So rationality or reason is the basic human function which separates us from all other animals. Our capacity to reason is what dictates us to make right and good ethical decisions. Human beings are the only animals capable of reasoning, and it's what keeps us analyze ethical or moral dilemmas. Right? Reasoning, therefore, is the foundation of ethical principles. So, to better understand this, we have to distinguish the types of reasoning. Basically, we have three types of reasoning. We have deductive, inductive, and abductive. However, we only need deductive or inductive reasoning in making moral decisions. So, ano nga bang deductive reasoning? This is used when general conclusion is provided and from there, possible causes and effects are thought of as the possible process of such an outcome. So, merong situation, for example, actually deductive reasoning would only happen when the event had already taken place. No? Kung ang isang moral dilemma had already taken place. Most often than not, nangyayari to sa mga courts, no? Sa mga legal courts. What they do is deductive reasoning. From what happened, from what the result of a certain event or a certain experience, from what took place, from there, investigation comes in by deductive reasoning. So for example, tatanungin ng lawyer, no, bakit ka nagnakaw? So yung, for example, yung let's go back to the example that we have a while ago. Yung pregnant, rather, unemployed mother whose children are starving to death. And yung deductive reasoning would come in by analyzing first the conclusion. No? For example, uh, nagnakaw nga siya, no? So parang tatanungin mo dun, bakit ka nagnakaw? So parang from the conclusion na nagnakaw ang isang uh, unemployed mother whose children are starving to death, magkakaroon ka ng deductive reasoning when you try to analyze what happened. So, unang tatanungin mo yan, why? Siyempre, una, why? Why? What action did it took place? What action did she do? What action did she choose to act on? Stealing? Uh, what's the reason behind such an action? Because her children are starving to death. Uh, is it ethical or moral to steal when your children are starving to death? Siyempre, ang sagot doon, no. Pero it is the lesser evil. It is the lesser evil. I'm not promoting stealing, no? Pero like I said a while ago, I'm not promoting stealing, pero when it comes to ethical moral dilemmas, when you really are faced with a life or death situation, you would normally choose the lesser evil. So deductive reasoning is used when general conclusion is provided, and from there, possible causes and effects are thought of as the possible process of such an outcome. So from a general conclusion to specific premises or statements. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, is an induction from premises or statements to a general conclusion. Helps come up with a hypothesis. So for example, Inductive reasoning would mean, ah, 'pag ang anak mo gutom, ikaw gutom din, wala kang pagkuhanan ng pagkain, anong gagawin mo? Ano yung possible na steps na puwede mong gawin? Sige, let's not talk about the lesser evil, yung good naman. Anyone? 'Pag ikaw, ah, nangangailangan ng pagkain, anong unang-una mong iisipin? Ano yung unang puwede mong gawin? Let's say wala kang mapag-utangan, magtrabaho, 'no? Yun yung hinahanap ko, magtrabaho siyempre. Kung ikaw ay hindi umaasa 'no, napaka-independent mo, ikaw ba Rizalin ay isang strong independent woman? Hindi mo na parang wala kang inaasahan na tutulong sa'yo. Siyempre ang unang papasok sa'yo, sa isip mo would be magtrabaho, maghanap ng trabaho. Ah, kaya nga kung minsan yung mga namamalimos, 'pag nakikita mong malaki yung katawan kaysa sa sa'yo magtataka ka, eh, "Bakit ka namamalimos, mas malaki yung katawan mo kaysa sa akin, magtrabaho ka." Ah, yun naman yung problema kasi hindi mo rin kasi alam kung ginagamit sila ng sindikato 'no, o kaya kuwan lang, talagang totoong hindi capable of, ah, working. Pero kasi ang laki ng katawan, eh. Hindi naman 'yan ganyan kalaking katawan kung hindi niya kayang kumain, parang gano'n. But anyway, kidding aside, so gano'n yung inductive reasoning 'no, when the opportunity presents itself, what are your possible options? So mag-inductive reasoning ka na, gagawa ka na ng sarili mong premises or statements, or rather when it comes to ethical case, you would foresee what possible outcomes could there be. So, for example, yung magtrabaho ka, ano kaya yung possible outcome nun? Siyempre magkakaroon ka ng pera and therefore mapapakain mo yung mga nagugutom mong anak, 'no? Um, so inductive reasoning is an induction from premises or statements to a general conclusion. So it helps come up with a hypothesis. Such reasoning is often used in the hard sciences. No? We have physics, chemistry, biology, as well as the soft sciences, psychology, economics, among others, to provide hypotheses for their supposed claims. In morality, we have the common mistake when it comes to doing good and avoiding evil. So there are two common motives which move a moral agent. I think na-mention ko na to, no? Last na lang ito. Then, let's let's look for the question questions later on. So there are two common motives which move a moral agent: desire for reward and fear of punishment. These motives are commonly mistaken as reasons for acting good. Diba? Nabanggit ko ata to kung di ako nagkakamali at kung naalala nyo pa. Kadalasan sa bata, tinuturo natin to. Pero that's okay kasi bata pa naman, they cannot really concept, no? They cannot really understand the certain concepts of why a certain act is bad in itself or good in itself. Not that they are not really good in itself and bad in itself, but it's actually because the language of the kids are limited. That's why we use desire for reward and fear of punishment. And mind you, madali kasing masaktan ng bata. So, mahirap, alam mo yun, tumingin ng salita na hindi sila magbe-breakdown, no? So, we use desire for reward and fear of punishment. However, when these are used for adults, then it's another story. Because as I have said before, you must always know why a certain good act is good in itself or why a certain bad act is bad in itself. For example, um, cheating. uh, There's the fear of punishment of being kicked out of the school. So kapag ang reasoning behind mo is, hindi ako nag-cheat kasi ayaw kong matalsik or ayaw kong mapaalis sa school na ito, there's something wrong with that reasoning. No? Ito actually, yung binigay ko example. Sorry, basahin ko lang to. However, these two do not provide the comprehension we need in order to understand why a certain good act is good or a certain bad act is bad. Only that we either receive reward for doing it or the consequence of being punished. For example, a student is taught not to cheat, no? But the school policy only says not to cheat to avoid being expelled or avoid failing the subject. Is that it does not say why it is bad to cheat or that it is good to avoid cheating. Such is the nature of rule. It only teaches us what to avoid to a certain reward or consequence, but it does not make us understand why it is bad. Hence, the need for moral reasoning. Either the method to be inductive or deductive will be the gateway to comprehending why good acts are good and when why bad acts are bad in and of out of themselves. So, in other words, no, yung desire for reward and fear of punishment are the common motives that and sadly for among adults as well. No, kapag ang isang empleyado ng isang gobyerno ay nag-i-stay lang sa isang office until 5 kasi yun ang sinasabi ng school policy, mag-stay ka hanggang 5, not really because you have a lot of work to do, no? Then you're only in it for the desire of reward, no? Kumbaga hindi mo naintindihan bakit kailangan pumasok lang hanggang alas 5. So, itong motives na ito will not make us understand why a certain action is bad in itself or good in itself. So kapag parang ano, kapag sinabi mong um, bawal magnakaw dahil makukulong ka, that is fear of punishment. Hindi siya yung motivation siya, no? That's good as a motivation. Pero kapag sinabi mo sa isang bata na huwag ka magnakaw dahil baka makulong ka, you're only stealing the idea of fear of punishment. Another way to teach the child would be, wag ka magnakaw dahil masama yun or wag ka magnakaw dahil kinukuha mo yung property ng ibang tao. Medyo hindi na siguro maintindihan ng bata yun. Pero kailangan mo i-explain, no? Ano yung property? Ano ang pinagkaiba nun? Parang gano'n. So, ayun. I think I will end there. No? Yun yung, uh, ito yung maling motives no? na usually the drivers of an action, desire for reward and fear of punishment. When in fact, you should already understand why a good act is good in itself and why a bad act is bad in itself. Okay? So I will end there.